Tammy does have an overview she can give if you want her to.
That would be great. You want to kick us off?
So this section of our budget hearing is land records and taxation, which includes the appraiser, the county clerk, the county treasurer, and the register of deeds office. The appraiser is where the property taxes begin with value assessments. The duties of the appraiser include mailing annual value notices, processing value appeals, and certifying the tax roll by June 1st to the county clerk. There is a supplemental request for the appraiser's office included in this year's options for the budget. There are 2 FTE for an appraiser 1 position. So 2 appraiser 1 positions, and Brad is here if you have more questions on that. The county clerk has 2 different departments. One is the general government department, responsible for accounts payable, maintaining the tax roll, revenue neutral rate notices, state abstract submission, as well as several other miscellaneous tasks. The clerk is responsible for all elections as well in Douglas County, and that budget is also included in the clerk's budget. You will notice that they have a couple of changes, and it is an election year. This is the state passed legislation requiring the county clerk to hold a presidential primary election starting in 2024, and that added a 3rd Lard election to the 2024 election calendar. The legislator has promised funds to reimburse for the election, but the state has not allocated those funds yet, so it is unknown what amount the reimbursement rate will actually be. So the overtime and contractual expenses in the county clerk's budget will reflect the addition of that presidential primary to the election calendar. The county treasurer is also part of our land records. They collect the taxes for both the general fund, ad valorem taxes, and motor vehicle operations fund. There are revenues that the Motor Vehicle Operations Fund receives from vehicle registration fees, satellite fees collected from vehicle renewals and registrations. The Motor Vehicle Operations Fund, as we mentioned, is not keeping up with the pace of salaries necessary to maintain motor vehicle staff. To accommodate this in 25's budget, 3 positions have been moved to the general fund. The fund balance in motor vehicle operations will continue to trend downward as expenses outpace the revenues. In the future, any personal expenses added to the treasurer will have to be considered to add to the general fund or increasing satellite fees or both. We do have some satellite fee changes this year that are going into place, and we are waiting to see how those impact that budget. The treasurer is asking for 1 new position this year, 1 FTE, a title support specialist, and there's more information about that in the book. The treasurer is also responsible for the county's investments of funds. The interest earned in recent years has been minimal, but with the increase in national interest rates, short-term investments are earning quite a bit more interest than before. The projected investments for 25 are on target for continuing the significant increase in interest that we earned and are seeing for 2024 revenues. The treasurer, Adam Rains, has more information on those revenues. And last but not least, the Register of Deeds. Their budget is mostly made up of personnel expenses with very little changes. In 2019, the legislator created a phase-out plan to terminate the mortgage registration fees and replace in part with filing fees. These fees, you will see, we used to collect in 2021, we collected $1.4 million in Register of Deeds fees, and in 2024, we anticipate hitting an all-time low of $600,000. We do believe this is the lowest that the annual fees will go, but it does depend on the housing market and people filing the paperwork. And Kent Brown has more information on those revenues. With that, I'll leave for questions.
All right. Well, I think we'll start with our appraiser because we have Brad here. We have a couple of department heads that are traveling. So I'll kick it off. The reserve account for a vehicle, is that, there hadn't been a reserve account prior? Is this one of those last pieces that we're getting into working on a reserve account basis for?
Yeah, our current vehicle is about 7.5 years old, and so I was just trying to do some planning for the future, so that way there'd be some money set aside for when the time comes, we'd have that money available to us.
So in beginning that reserve fund, then by the time that vehicle is needed, it's intended that that would be able to pay cash for that.
Right, about 5 years, I think, is what we put on that.
Okay, thank you. So has there been an increase in, let's see, what do I say, people asking for a reevaluation of their property taxes? And has that done anything to the workload?
For appeals, yeah, since 2020, our appeal volume probably went up about 50%. So we used to have about an average of 600 to 800 appeals per year. And the past 3 years, we'd have over 1,000. And so it's quite a bit. And we have a very rigid timeline to get through those. And so a lot of work gets put on hold while we process those appeals, so that way we can certify the tax roll by June 1st.
Brad, is that something that you, like a chart or something that would be easy for you to produce that you already have that you could send to us this week
could.
that shows
Yeah.
that uptick? You said increased by 50% since 2020. I'm just curious to see if it's gradually increasing year over year, or if it feels like if you have any sense of whether it's bottomed out or.
It feels like
reached
it's the new
ceiling,
normal.
maybe?
The first year after COVID, we started seeing some of the initial escalations in prices for the houses. And so, we had about 10 to 15% increase in values that year in 2021. And then 2022, we saw, I think, an average of 18% increase in values. And so we had 1,300 people come in 2021, about 1,200 came in 2022. And then last year, it came down to about 1,150. And then this year was about 1,050. So it's starting to taper off, but
Okay.
I feel like in this day and age, we have a lot more concerned citizens and want to see more information. And, the tax bill, as you guys hear a lot, is one of the most significant things that folks have to deal with. And so we have to give it a little bit more TLC these days to make sure we have good documentation and explain how we've done the valuation.
Thank you. Good recall, by the way. Thanks for rattling off each year's number.
And I do encourage people to get reevaluated if they feel like they
Yeah,
need
absolutely.
to. I
We
think
do
that
as well, yeah.
it's everyone's right to have that if they have questions. So in looking at like parcels per staff, which is something you gave us along with the supplemental request, and Douglas County, kind of where they fit in the scheme of things with that. Is parcels per staff, that's a stand-in for a workload, but there's other pieces like the appeals process and everything don't get reflected in here. Is this a pretty accurate reflection of your office's work relative to nearby counties?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing there is that we're doing the most we can with the least amount of human resources on that. We don't have a perfect comp, like we would see on a sales comp grid where we look at for values, but we fall somewhere near Reno County, Leavenworth County, Saline County, Butler County. If you look at those folks, they have fewer parcels than us, and they have nearly the same amount of FTEs or more in some cases when you look at Butler and Riley County. And geographically speaking, Riley County is significantly smaller in terms of square miles, and so there's larger counties. You have Johnson County and Wyandotte. They have different economies of scale and a little bit different urban situation to work with than we do. Sedgwick County and Shawnee County, they're sure they're the best metrics. Sedgwick County is going through some struggles right now with some of their appraisal staff and other things, and so I'm not sure if that 70 figure is inaccurate for what they need.
You have a request in for one additional, I'm just going to find that.
For two additional appraiser ones, yeah. The other big concern for us is that, we have two people that are going to be retiring in the next year or two. I know one for sure next year, and that gentleman's been in the business for 20 plus years on the government side of appraisal. And I have another person, I'm not sure when he's going to retire, but these are things that we're trying to brace for. It takes at least 1 to 2 years to onboard a brand new green person. and then another 5 years to try to get them trained in valuation side. And so just getting somebody on staff and onboarded so that way we can turn them loose in the next 2 years. That's the goal, trying to be able to transition those retirements.
Yeah, and that's the piece that I was looking at in terms of like, is there a space where that's kind of a temporary additional position that then doesn't get backfilled once we have some retirements, so we can start onboarding some folks, start that training process
Right.
with the anticipation that we're losing some people, but not necessarily replace that total number of positions. So it's just a curiosity to kind of pitch past my other commissioners.
We have the ability to do that. I mean, I've approved overhires before if it's, so my assumption is that this was an addition to full-time staffing.
Yeah.
So if we need to just do an overhire, we can certainly just do an overhire.
Just looking to see what the other options are, so thank you.
One of the things I look at is sort of your overall increase in budget and not including the supplemental request. It's at 94,000, which is about 8% up, which is a little higher than that 6.89%. So that takes me back into looking at line by line in your budget. This one jumped out at me because I don't see it, I think, in any other department, and it's $20,000 for incentive pay. Can you tell me what that is?
I can.
Yeah.
For our appraisal staff, professional development is a significant part of our job, and along with the training of just getting a person on board just to go out and list and measure properties and be familiar with the characteristics of different types of construction, there's the valuation side. And so it takes 300 course hours to get a certification. It's called a Registered Mass Appraisal designation from the Department of Revenue. It's similar to what the private sector has for certified appraisers. And then it also has continuing education to go along with that. And so when our staff goes through that extra effort to get that education, because it takes on a lot, you're taking week-long classes, and you have the stress of passing exams, and then just to get the certification, you have 2 case studies and then a final exam, which is called the County Appraiser Eligibility Exam. And so with that, there's a lot of work, and it's not just the 8 to 5 work to get that through. And so that's part of the incentive pay that goes with that.
I would say we do have incentives in some other departments. We just don't necessarily budget for them on a separate line like that.
And it seems like I did see that within some departments. I didn't flag exactly which ones that always was, but that was a question that I had kind of for a larger conversation. So in terms of the incentive pay, you didn't have anything budgeted for that up until the 2024 budget. Is that because it wasn't anticipated that you were onboarding folks during that time?
I think there was an increase last year in the budget for that incentive pay, and so that was part of the increase. This year, I have 1 person, probably 2, getting their designation that just met the requirements, and so I'm just trying to brace for that extra cost.
So when they meet that requirement, is that what takes them from an appraiser 3 to an appraiser 2, or?
Appraiser 1's the entry level point.
Okay.
We have appraiser 2s that are not qualified. They can become eligible for an appraiser 3 or a management position with that designation.
So they would, and that, I'm going to assume that that's a higher rate of pay as well.
That's correct.
And do we pay for the training?
Yes.
So we pay for the training, we pay for an incentive, and they will be paid more?
Yes.
Okay.
To welcome the county clerk. We did start without you, I'm sorry, but we hadn't finished earlier, and so we were talking with our appraiser. Do we have any other questions for Brad? Okay.
I think Adam Raines might be joining us online, but I haven't seen him come in yet.
Okay. Well, how about we pivot to our county clerk? Do we have questions for Jamie? I guess the main one I have, and I think I know the answer for why this isn't budgeted, would be the reimbursement for the presidential preference primary. Are we anticipating being reimbursed for that? Or,
I believe we've already received it.
so we received it in 2024, so there won't be anything
Yeah, I
budgeted
think a
for
couple weeks
25.
ago we received it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so no reimbursements anticipated for 25.
At this time, no one's calling a special election. And I haven't heard from anybody that is thinking about it, but if we did, there would be a reimbursement.
Okay. And so like the Baldwin had a special election. Is that something that gets reimbursed within this year also?
Yes.
But yeah, if it's on, so we don't always create a budget for those. We did for the presidential preference, but sometimes these pop up and Jamie doesn't necessarily know. So,
Right.
so that's the reason why I don't have anything for 25 or the rest of 24.
I didn't have a lot of questions for Jamie. Does anyone else? Okay. No, that's it. That's all I've got. Well, that's all you have. Yeah, I don't have.
So, Jamie, I'm just sort of interested. So when I look at the increase in budget, it's up 19%, right, from the previous year for county clerk. And when I go back and look at other years, it's a significant jump about every year. About every year, we're seeing about 30,000, about 30,000. One of the things that I was interested in is building rental. Have we ever considered purchasing that building instead of renting that building? Is that an option for us?
I don't believe purchasing that building is an option. There's never been a discussion about purchasing. The way that contract is set up, it goes up a certain amount each year. We've never had a discussion about purchasing a building. I don't think that one would be open that I would know of.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of how and certainly there's pay increases for staff each year, but is there something that you're seeing now over the past 4 or 5 years that would require, like what is happening that's requiring 20% increases in budget every year?
Well, and I put it in my narratives there. A couple of it is costs. So like envelope and paper costs keep increasing quite a bit each year. Each ballot is up to about 30 cents a ballot. We order a couple 100,000 each year. And then a lot of our ongoing software licenses and equipment licenses keep going up quite a bit each year. I think you hear that from IT quite a bit too. I think that's how a lot of vendors are starting to cover some of their costs.
This may be more of a Sarah question. We were talking about how pay increases get worked into different budgets. So this one has adjustment to pay plan and merit pay. We're not seeing any incentive pay like we were seeing with the appraiser. Just what gets worked into the individual department's budget versus what gets worked in off of that 3 million pool that's in administration.
The 3 million that's in administration is for the McGrath compensation study. So that would be, but we haven't completed the study. So I don't know what amounts to put in each department yet.
So the line that we have here is just the market adjustment.
Market and merit. So
In
have
separate
market
lines.
and merit on
Okay.
separate lines. And
Thank
that's,
you.
sometimes we used to combine them. Sometimes we did separate lines. I think this year we're really trying to have 2 lines for everybody, one for market, one for merit. But that's not how we did it in the past. Sometimes they were combined.
Just for an extra point of clarity, merit pay is called merit pay, but adjustment to pay plan is the market.
Is the market adjustment,
Okay,
correct.
thank you. Oh, sorry.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions for Jamie, for our county clerk?
And Adam is online if we need him.
Okay. I will have at least one question for Adam, if he see.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, thank you. The motor vehicle supervisor, can you talk about that position?
Yes, so that position is one we added last year. So we filled that position beginning of this year. They are responsible for mostly our financial aspects of things. So we have to reconcile or balance our motor vehicle. They're responsible for payments, of course, answering phones, approving titles, those kind of tasks.
Okay, and then within your supplemental request, you have a request for a title support specialist. Can you talk about that position?
Yes, so the title support specialist is a back office position. So they are helping answering phones, but they're mostly dealing with helping customers, approving those titles, helping staff answer questions. So if they run into issues they've never seen before, they bring it back to one of the title support specialists. they're really kind of our experts. So if anything goes wrong, they're able to contact the state or kind of work through the issue with that frontline staff.
So I know it's in here, but how many FTEs total do you have at the moment?
22.
Question for Sarah. Sarah, in here, in the supplemental request, it mentions the increase in revenue in 90,000. What I'm familiar with is I'm familiar with systems, when we charge a fee, we have to keep it within that department. Is this the same, that we have to keep it in that department?
Yeah, it goes into the motor vehicle fund.
Okay, but motor vehicle fund doesn't pay enough for all the costs that we have, right? So isolating that in that budget request, it's not like we can say that increase in fees is definitely going to that position.
I'd say it could go to the position, but the whole department doesn't generate enough fee revenue to support the entire operations. So, and, when we did increase those, but, I'd say like we are still not at the maximum. Johnson County charges $5 for every transaction anywhere you do it. So we don't charge the maximum amount.
Okay, thanks.
And that's related to that, Cami, in your kind of overview, you talked about that we've moved 3 positions from the treasurer's budget to the general fund.
Correct.
And that is because they're not being covered under motor vehicle.
Correct.
But up until now, that's where they've been housed?
We've gone back and forth at different times depending on how fee revenue's gone. I would just say this is a fund that every year we look at and just determined if the revenue is enough to support the operations, and then if not, we transfer positions to the general fund.
Are there any other questions, commissioners, for Adam, for the treasurer? None for me. Okay, none from me either. And I don't know that I have any questions for Register of Deeds either.
Yep. Okay.
Any others? All right,
This would allow us to get to the judge's lunch on time.
it will. Well, thank you both for being here in person, and Adam for being here virtually. And I think that is all. We are going to recess until tomorrow at 9 a.m. for more budget hearings. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.